Hi, I'm Shelley Kelly. Thanks for listening. This is my paper for the Experiential Design Rethinking Relations Between People, Objects and Environments conference at Florida State University, 16th to the 17th of January 2020. My topic is Codesigning Sensory Play Spaces for Children with Disabilities, a Model for Inclusion. Virginia Woolf was a strong advocate for having a room of one's own. And this is seen daily for most of us making our way mid-morning to our own place of refuge to have a coffee and relax. A room or a space that is also free from judgment of others to unwind and occasionally lose control. A respite when we just need a break. As a starting point for this research, I've undertaken a literature review on children with disabilities, particularly sensory processing disorders, and various co-design approaches that meet the needs of these children, affording them greater inclusion in school and society. I will then explain further the needs of someone living with sensory processing disorder, or SPD, and how it affects them in their daily lives. By identifying the needs of these children, it will allow us to look for possible solutions in how to allay their discomfort and improve their mental health, well-being and self-esteem through appropriately designed spaces and what this affords. This will lead on to disability theory and inclusion of children with disability and how this has been discussed, formulated and ratified from the 1970s onwards. This literature review will then highlight various user-focused design alternatives, exposing the difficulties and utilising the strengths of working with children with disabilities. It will also look at the ways of adapting and modifying activities in co-design projects, and also look at successful projects that have used a different and open approach to participation that allows the voice of the child with disability to be heard by building capacity and empowerment at the same time. By appreciating the unique needs of these children through an empathetic approach and understanding the context of the end user allows for a more considered approach to possible solutions. More focused research on children with disability using equitable and participatory approaches allows for better involvement and understanding of their life experiences. This affords them vocal agency and empowerment to effect real change in decisions and matters that affect their lives. Children with disability have the best understanding of their own needs, and this will provide an opportunity to give them a voice. Children with disabilities, or neurodiverse children, are largely excluded from school lunchtime play spaces. There are multiple factors influencing this social exclusion, such as lack of physical access, power imbalance, anxiety and sensory processing disorders, which make their experiences uncomfortable and challenging. Yet what they simply seek is a fun, safe and secure place free of judgment and prejudice, in which to relax, play and make connections. A space to play is vital for balanced childhood development, both physically and emotionally, with the critical years of development at school. A solution this research seeks to investigate lies in creating a new approach for inclusive sensory play space design, developed through a co-design framework from the perspective of the child with disability for all children. In developing a co-design methodology, it's essential to first identify the key sensory issues. SPD is a neurological disorder that affects the regulation of behaviours and emotions from sensory input. Some children are highly sensitive to their environments, which have profound impacts on their daily lives, their peers, and their interactions with others. SPD is apparent in children with autism spectrum disorder, ASD, and attention deficit hyperactive disorder, ADHD, but it also manifests in neurotypical children, with some 10 to 55% occurring in children with no diagnosis at all. Within society at large, the problems for a child with SPD can be accentuated. Some children are highly reactive or underreactive to certain sensory stimuli, or situations and have difficulty regulating and responding to behaviours appropriately. Developing an understanding of certain triggers can avoid major inappropriate behaviours occurring, so children are more comfortable in that environment. As part of self-regulating their emotions, they develop specific techniques for self-soothing in stressful situations. Mannerisms such as rocking, spinning, twisting fingers, and noise aversion vary in degree between children but are essential for their coping mechanisms. As a result, autistic mannerisms are often perceived as socially inappropriate by neurotypical people. In the broader society, there are possibilities for adopting some of these measures to control behaviours ourselves in order to decrease our own stress and anger management. This study will be informed from a social model of disability viewpoint, which allows the perspective to be understood and heard on its own terms, not as a social construct. As not all disabilities are visible, as in the case of mental health and illness, this view highlights the individual traits and strengths instead of seeing the person solely through their disability. Although policies around the world are calling for children with disabilities to be included in the mainstream school systems, this is not well established. For them to be included, they must seem to fit in, without disrupting the majority. This highlights the equity and social richness these children afford, and that their absence of being fully included is based on ableist assumptions. This is hampered by a lack of neurodiverse children being included in both research and policy making to foster any real pragmatic changes. Research needs to find its way back into politicizing the neurodiverse discourse in schools for effective inclusion to take place. Researchers are in agreement across the literature that sensory processing issues impact on inclusive and meaningful relationships, with early intervention being critical. With greater understanding of SPD, there is growing evidence that indicates children with early sensory difficulties can later be linked to social and mental health problems. Self-regulation control determines the behaviours and self-esteem of children at school and puts them at risk as they mature, therefore stating a clear link between acknowledgement and intervention of self-regulation skills with more favourable life outcomes for the future. 1 in 5 Australian adults, approximately 3.2 million people, experience a common mental illness such as anxiety or mood disorder in any 12-month period. Subsequently, some children with disabilities and SPD just arriving at school can be challenging due to anxiety levels and breakdown in social relationships with peers. Therefore, having to face the same social scenarios daily becomes overwhelming. For children with disability, this affects levels of participation in school activities, prejudice, social exclusion, and a reduced self-worth. These children and families struggle to participate in schools and society more broadly, and early interventions to manage their sensory issues daily and foster their optimal involvement are critical. Research has supported early intervention as key in changing perception of children with disabilities, and maybe this needs to be reflected by changes to the target range of intervention focus from teens to adults to a younger age group, as indicated in the Salamanca Statement of 1994. With the rise of mental health issues in the past 10 years and an increase in early age anxiety at primary school level, this shift would positively support these children at an earlier age. Education plays a key role in challenging the discriminatory behaviours toward neurodiverse students, as social exclusion in some form is commonly experienced in their daily lives. The Salamanca Statement of 1994 provided the basis for the rights of the diverse child to be included in schools, but only through education and altering the attitudes and perspectives of how neurotypical students see disability can transformation in the broader community occur. A successful inclusive education system can be developed by changing attitudes toward discrimination and by empowering the neurodiverse child to negotiate their inclusion in school spaces. Schools need to rise to this challenge in shifting the way children with disabilities are seen, so this can also influence social and communal expectations. Over the past 10 years, there have been several effective approaches toward inclusion, empowerment, and finding common ground for neurodiverse children addressed through Codesign projects. Designers need to have an open approach to co-design and respect different views, with all participants having input into projects on equal terms, as this offers a democratic approach to working. Users are encouraged to speak their own language, which is particularly relevant for neurodiverse children, thereby retaining their power. If users are non-verbal, then it is up to the designers to seek alternative actions. Look for emotional or gestural cues to understand the user's perspective, which is particularly relevant for neurodiverse user groups. We need to find ways to accommodate the needs of children with disabilities as we advocate equal agency for them to participate. Yet this is not available to all of them due to power imbalances. Some researchers may contest that it is too stressful for neurodiverse children to become equal design partners. However, by involving children, even the challenging ones, this allows for greater representation and subsequently more universally usable end products. Researchers have used Codesign effectively in different ways to be flexible with diverse behaviours. This transforms some of the rigid and literal traits of children with disability and creates a balance for participation using visual schedules and timetables successfully in group activities, in particular adapting and modifying educational models already in use at schools with children with disability, such as TEA-CCH model, or treatment and education of autistic and related communication handicapped children. By considering the needs of the child with disability, their environment, and the important bond between the researcher and the child, different models have emerged that support the child with disability as a valuable contributor and an equal voice in decisions that affect their lives. In some cases, this relationship building may take up to 6 months to establish, but in this time, an understanding of the child's nature, rigidity, triggers, and difficulties can alert the researcher how best to adapt and work co-creatively together. Empathy in the relationship between the child with disability and the designer is paramount due to the nature of their condition and difficulties building trust in social relationships. Therefore, playing, having fun through games and storytelling is vital in gaining this trust and achieving cooperation. There has been some focus on scaffolding this social skill area through games and storytelling in order to promote social inclusion and interaction. There are considerations to be made for the neurodiverse child that they may prefer highly repetitive engagements and activities. These activities need to be considered more broadly for it to be interesting to neurotypical children as well, if aiming for an inclusive engagement or space. Other researchers have emphasized the importance of play as a focus and keeping it as an open, fun, imaginative process, which does not necessarily fixate on attaining goals or solving specific design problems to achieve results. Consistently, all researchers using Codesign with neurodiverse children believe this group can contribute meaningfully and add value to the design process. Codesign increases social interaction with children and enhances their feeling of being valued because their ideas have been listened to. By challenging the participatory process and questioning how to best engage spontaneously with children with disability, will provide the answers in how they approach the world. This way, the choices made as designers and the elements chosen will be specific, yet broader and richer. In some projects, researchers suggest an approach by using some ambiguous objects in their workshops, so the children have some control over their imaginative storytelling in case they're a little unsure about what to say about an actual object. The approach of the Codesign projects varied. Some projects asked questions back and forth of the participants, changing the power balance, checking on accuracy of presentation of ideas, and how the project manifested, encouraging a mutual dialogue. This proved both valuable and respectful to monitor the child's progress, along with their input while being flexible in approach, as some days cooperation was unpredictable. Some projects between neurotypical and neurodiverse children showed mutual benefits through improvement in shared communication. In other projects, co-designing particular spaces to meet neurodiverse needs, the children said they felt safer and in control when they had their own dedicated space at school to go to. Although there needs to be more research from the perspective of the neurodiverse child, there is evidence of an increase in researchers looking for mutual opportunities for involving neurotypical as well as neurodiverse children by teaching children strategies as peer leaders to engage children with disability. This engagement fosters communication and positive relationships across the school sector. There is evidence in the broader school community that these co-design projects have been beneficial in promoting an empathetic bond between the children. Considering initial engagement of these projects was solely with neurodiverse students, benefits were found to have also successfully influenced the interests of the neurotypical child and the broader community. Understanding the needs of the child and working to incorporate those needs within the co-design framework is critical. The diverse abilities of these children require us as researchers to keep pace with their shifting needs and think creatively ourselves about solutions or risks contributing to their alienation in the future. In utilising their strengths, they can teach us how to see the world as they experience the world, which will tailor more effective and suitable outcomes. With this literature review in mind, this exposes the need for further research, both with children and children with disabilities, better understanding of sensory processing disorder, new approaches to fully include neurodiversity in co-design projects. Considering these, this will be the starting point for my co-design project. As Virginia Woolf said, we all need a room of our own, and these kids need their own space too. Thank you.